The devil can't touch you anymore, you've changed. There was a time when darkness recognized you instantly, when confusion followed you like a shadow, when fear knew your name and doubt felt at home in your thoughts, but something has shifted now, and the reason the devil can't touch you anymore is not because the world became kinder, not because life got easier, not because temptation disappeared, but because you changed, and the most dangerous thing to darkness is not noise, not rebellion, not even struggle, but transformation that happens quietly, deeply, and permanently. The enemy does not fear people who shout about faith, the enemy fears people who have been broken, rebuilt, and no longer respond the way they used to. You used to panic, now you pause. You used to chase, now you discern. You used to beg for validation, now you walk with authority. Something ancient recognizes something eternal in you now, and that is why resistance has increased but access has been revoked. There is a spiritual law that very few people talk about, and it is this: darkness can only attach itself to what agrees with it. Fear invites fear. Shame feeds shame. Chaos multiplies chaos. But when you no longer resonate with those frequencies, when your inner world no longer vibrates at the same level, the connection collapses. This is why old temptations don't hit the same. This is why certain doors simply stopped opening. This is why some people drifted away without explanation. This is why situations that once destroyed you now barely shake you. You didn't become perfect, you became aware. You didn't become untouchable, you became aligned. And alignment is what cuts access. Even ancient psychology confirms what spiritual truth has always known: the human mind rewires itself when patterns are interrupted long enough. Neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity, but long before science named it, Scripture understood it. The renewal of the mind is not poetic language. It is literal transformation. When thought patterns change, emotional reflexes change. When emotional reflexes change, behavior changes. When behavior changes, identity follows. And when identity shifts, authority is established. This is why temptation loses its grip when identity is solid. The devil doesn't tempt who he already owns, and he retreats from who he can no longer deceive. There is a reason storms seem to rage when you are closest to breakthrough. Resistance intensifies when influence is rising. Even history reflects this pattern. Every figure who shifted spiritual atmospheres was opposed not when they were hidden, but when they were becoming effective. This is why even Jesus Christ was tempted not at the beginning of his life, but after 40 days of clarity, fasting, and alignment. Temptation did not come because he was weak, but because he was powerful. And notice something subtle yet profound: the devil quoted Scripture, but Jesus responded with identity. That is the secret most people miss. Knowledge alone doesn't stop darkness, embodiment does. You have reached a point where manipulation no longer works because guilt no longer controls you. Fear no longer paralyzes you. Approval no longer defines you. That is why attacks feel different now. They are louder but less effective. They are dramatic but shorter-lived. They shake the surface but cannot enter the core. This is not accidental. This is growth. This is maturity. This is spiritual adulthood. The enemy thrives on emotional reactivity, but you have learned stillness. He thrives on isolation, but you have learned connection. He thrives on secrecy, but you have learned truth. And truth is not just something you believe, it is something you live. There is something else happening that many people misunderstand. When darkness can no longer reach you directly, it often tries indirectly. Distractions increase. Delays appear. Fatigue whispers. Doubt dresses itself as logic. But notice this, none of it feels as convincing as it once did. You may feel pressure, but not possession. You may feel resistance, but not captivity. This is because authority has shifted. You are no longer fighting for victory, you are enforcing it. The battle is no longer about survival, it is about stewardship. And stewardship requires discernment, not desperation. Ancient texts describe armor not as decoration, but as identity reinforcement. Truth, righteousness, peace, faith, these are not weapons, they are states of being. When you live from them, not just believe in them, you become inaccessible. This is why the enemy cannot touch you the way he used to. You are no longer operating from wounds, you are operating from wisdom. You are no longer driven by fear of loss, you are guided by clarity of purpose. And clarity is terrifying to chaos. Have you noticed how some of the things that once hurt you deeply now feel strangely distant, as if they belong to another version of you? That is not suppression, that is transcendence. Suppression hides pain. Transcendence outgrows it. You didn't deny your past, you integrated it. You didn't erase your scars, you turned them into sight. And when pain loses its power to define you, it also loses its power to control you. Even modern studies reveal something fascinating. People who develop strong internal meaning systems become more resilient under pressure. They recover faster. They make better decisions. They resist manipulation more effectively. What science measures statistically, spirituality explains relationally. Meaning is not abstract, it is anchoring. And when your meaning is rooted beyond circumstances, circumstances lose leverage. This is why certain cycles ended without dramatic confrontation. This is why some habits fell off quietly. This is why some temptations simply lost interest in you. You are no longer useful to darkness the way you once were. You question narratives. You pause before reacting. You sense before deciding. And most importantly, you no longer hate yourself for being human. Self-hatred was the open door. Compassion closed it. There is a moment in every transformation when silence becomes louder than noise. When peace feels unfamiliar but right. When chaos feels foreign. That moment is not emptiness, it is recalibration. And during recalibration, darkness often attempts one last echo of old voices, not because it has power, but because it remembers access. But access without agreement is nothing. A key without a lock is useless. You have learned something that cannot be unlearned. You have seen through illusions. You have recognized patterns. You have felt truth resonate in your body, not just your beliefs. And once that happens, regression becomes nearly impossible. You may stumble, but you will not forget who you are. You may feel tired, but you will not feel lost. You may feel pressure, but you will not feel owned. The most surprising truth is this: the devil doesn't retreat because you became stronger, he retreats because you became clearer. Strength can be challenged. Clarity cannot be confused. This is why your discernment has sharpened. This is why you sense misalignment quickly. This is why certain conversations drain you and others energize you. This is why you crave depth instead of drama. You didn't become boring, you became intentional. And here is the part most people are never told: when darkness can't touch you anymore, it doesn't always disappear, it watches. It waits for distraction. It hopes for forgetfulness. It looks for moments when you doubt your growth. But that is why remembrance matters. Remember who you were. Remember what you survived. Remember what you learned. Remember what changed. Because the only way access returns is if awareness leaves. You are not who you were when fear ran your life. You are not who you were when approval defined your worth. You are not who you were when silence scared you. And the fact that you are still here, still standing, still seeking truth, still choosing growth, is proof that something eternal has taken root in you. If this message feels like it is speaking directly to you, it is not coincidence. Truth recognizes readiness. And if you have made it this far, then somewhere deep inside, you know this is not entertainment, it is confirmation. So if this resonated, if it put words to what you have been feeling but couldn't explain, if it reminded you of how far you've come and how much has changed, then don't keep it to yourself. Someone you know is still fighting battles you've already survived. Someone is still stuck in cycles you've already broken. Share this with them. Let this be the message that reaches them at the right moment. And if you want more messages like this, messages that don't just motivate but awaken, that don't just inspire but transform, then like this video so it reaches those who need it, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and stay connected, because what you are becoming is just beginning. Then understand this as the story moves forward without pause, without reset, without repeating a single breath of what has already been spoken, because transformation does not restart, it deepens. What you are experiencing now is not the excitement of awakening, but the steadiness of becoming. Awakening is loud. Becoming is quiet. Awakening shakes your world. Becoming rebuilds it. And that is why it feels different now. The chaos that once screamed at you now whispers, and even those whispers feel hollow, like echoes in a room you no longer live in. You have moved houses internally. Your soul has changed addresses. And darkness cannot reach what it cannot locate. There was a time when you mistook intensity for purpose and urgency for destiny. You believed that if something felt overwhelming, it must be important. But wisdom has taught you otherwise. True purpose is calm. True alignment feels grounded, not frantic. True calling does not beg for attention, it commands presence. And this is why confusion no longer seduces you. You have learned the difference between pressure and guidance, between impulse and intuition, between noise and knowing. That alone disarms most attacks before they even form. You may have noticed that people who once triggered you now barely register. Situations that once consumed your thoughts now pass through your awareness like clouds across the sky. This is not apathy, it is sovereignty. Emotional sovereignty is one of the highest forms of freedom, and it is one of the most feared states by anything that thrives on control. When your emotions were easily hijacked, your direction could be redirected. But now, you respond instead of react. You choose instead of comply. You observe instead of absorb. And observation breaks enchantment. Ancient wisdom understood this long before modern language tried to explain it. To see clearly is to be free. Blindness is not lack of sight, it is lack of awareness. And awareness is what you have cultivated through pain, reflection, loss, prayer, silence, and perseverance. Nothing about this was accidental. Every disappointment refined you. Every delay trained you. Every heartbreak sharpened your discernment. You were not being punished, you were being prepared. This preparation is why you now sense things before they fully appear. You feel misalignment in your body before your mind can justify it. You sense when something is off even if it looks perfect on the surface. That intuition is not imagination, it is integration. Your mind, heart, and spirit are no longer fragmented. They are communicating. And unified awareness is impenetrable. There is a subtle but profound shift that happens when a person stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "What is this teaching me?" That question alone changes everything. Victimhood dissolves. Responsibility awakens. Power returns. And once power returns, darkness loses relevance. Not because it vanishes, but because it no longer has leverage. Leverage requires ignorance. You are no longer ignorant of patterns, of cycles, of manipulation, of your own worth. You have also learned something rare: stillness is not weakness. Silence is not avoidance. Rest is not laziness. These were lies designed to keep you exhausted and distracted. But you discovered that stillness sharpens perception, silence strengthens discernment, and rest restores authority. An exhausted soul is easily influenced. A rested soul is grounded. And grounded souls are difficult to move without consent. This is why your pace has slowed but your progress has accelerated. You no longer rush decisions. You no longer chase validation. You no longer explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You conserve energy now, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And wisdom is expensive. It costs you old versions of yourself, familiar pain, comfortable chaos, and predictable suffering. But what it gives you in return is priceless: peace with depth, confidence without arrogance, faith without fear. There is something else that has changed, something almost invisible unless you pay attention. Your inner dialogue is kinder. The voice that once accused you has softened. The shame that once followed you has loosened its grip. Self-compassion has replaced self-condemnation. And that is not a small change, that is a structural shift. Self-hatred was the enemy's strongest ally. When you stopped attacking yourself, you closed one of the biggest gateways darkness ever had. You now understand that growth is not about becoming someone else, it is about unbecoming everything you were never meant to carry. False beliefs. Inherited fears. Borrowed expectations. Trauma-based identities. You are shedding layers, not adding masks. And the more you shed, the lighter you become. The lighter you become, the higher your perspective rises. And from higher ground, old traps are easy to see. This is why guilt-based control no longer works on you. You can acknowledge mistakes without drowning in them. You can take responsibility without self-destruction. You can repent without groveling. You understand now that humility is not humiliation. Humility is clarity about who you are and who you are not. And clarity dissolves manipulation. Even temptation has changed its strategy with you. It no longer comes boldly, it comes subtly. Not offering obvious destruction, but small compromises. Not loud rebellion, but quiet distraction. Because that is the only angle left. But even here, awareness stands guard. You feel the drain before damage occurs. You sense the pull before the fall. And often, you simply walk away, not dramatically, not angrily, just knowingly. That quiet "no" is louder than any battle cry. There is a sacred exhaustion that comes before a new level of peace. Not burnout, but completion. The tiredness of someone who has learned enough lessons to stop repeating them. The fatigue of cycles closing. The weariness of a season ending. And if you feel that now, it is not a warning, it is a signal. Something is finishing. Something is settling. Something is stabilizing. And stability terrifies chaos. You have crossed an internal threshold. You may not have marked it with ceremony, but your nervous system knows. Your spirit knows. Your reactions know. You are no longer easily provoked because you are no longer easily threatened. You know who you are becoming, even if the full picture is still forming. And identity in progress is still identity. It is still powerful. This is why comparison has lost its grip on you. You no longer envy paths that are not yours. You no longer rush timelines that are not aligned. You no longer measure your worth by external milestones. You measure by integrity, by growth, by peace. Because the battlefield has shifted. The fight is no longer for your soul, it is against your consistency. And consistency is built quietly, daily, through small choices that no one applauds. Choices you are already making. So if you ever wonder why certain doors remain closed, remember this: not every closed door is denial. Some are protection. Some are redirection. Some are preservation of what is growing inside you. You no longer need access to everything. You need alignment with what matters. And alignment narrows options but strengthens outcomes. You have changed in ways that cannot be undone. You see too much now to be deceived the same way. You feel too deeply now to settle for shallow connections. You know too clearly now to return to confusion. And that is why the devil can't touch you anymore, not because you are unreachable, but because you are unrecognizable to your former patterns. And if this message has stayed with you, if it feels like it has been walking beside you rather than just passing through your ears, then let it move beyond you. Let it reach someone who is still where you once were. Share it not because it is dramatic, but because it is true. Like it not for the algorithm alone, but so it finds those who are searching in silence. Subscribe not out of habit, but out of intention, because what comes next will meet you where you are becoming, not where you have been. And remember this: as you move forward, growth does not announce itself. It reveals itself through peace, through clarity, through quiet strength. And once you have tasted that, nothing false can hold you again. And as this unfolding continues, something else becomes unmistakably clear: the battles that once consumed entire seasons of your life now last moments, sometimes only seconds, because you no longer negotiate with what you already understand. Understanding is final. Once you truly see a pattern, it loses the power to disguise itself. This is why discernment feels like a shield you don't have to lift, it simply surrounds you. You don't brace yourself the way you used to. You don't rehearse defenses. You don't anticipate harm with anxiety. You move forward with quiet confidence, and confidence that is quiet is the most unshakable kind. There was a phase when you believed strength meant endurance at all costs, staying longer than necessary, tolerating what was draining, proving loyalty through suffering. But maturity has rewritten that belief. You now understand that endurance without direction is just prolonged pain. True strength knows when to stay and when to step away. And stepping away is not failure, it is mastery. Mastery of self. Mastery of boundaries. Mastery of discernment. And mastery is something darkness cannot dominate, because domination requires compliance, and you no longer offer it unconsciously. You may notice that life has become simpler, not easier, but simpler. Fewer emotional extremes. Fewer internal arguments. Fewer sleepless nights fueled by overthinking. Complexity once made you feel important, as if constant struggle meant constant growth. But simplicity has taught you something deeper: peace is not boring, it is spacious. And in that space, creativity returns, clarity sharpens, and joy finds room to breathe again. Your prayers have changed too, even if you don't talk about it. You no longer beg for rescue as often. You ask for wisdom more than escape. You ask for alignment more than relief. You ask for strength to walk through rather than shortcuts to get around. And this shift matters. Because when your prayers change, your posture changes. And when your posture changes, what once loomed over you now stands beneath you. There is also a growing honesty within you that refuses to perform spirituality for approval. You are less interested in appearing faithful and more committed to being faithful. Less focused on sounding wise and more focused on living truthfully. You have learned that real transformation doesn't always look impressive from the outside. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away without explanation. But heaven recognizes it, even when people don't. And perhaps one of the most profound changes is this: you no longer confuse familiarity with safety. What is familiar is not always good for you. What feels normal is not always healthy. You have learned to question comfort zones that cost you peace. You have learned to challenge routines that keep you small. You have learned that growth often feels awkward before it feels right. And because you have learned this, stagnation no longer seduces you. There is a calm authority settling into your presence now. Not dominance. Not superiority. Authority rooted in self-trust. You listen to advice, but you no longer outsource your intuition. You receive feedback, but you no longer abandon your values to please others. You remain teachable without being malleable. And that balance is rare. Rare enough to disrupt old dynamics. Rare enough to unsettle environments that relied on your self-doubt. This is why some people may respond differently to you now. Some will feel inspired. Some will feel uncomfortable. Some will drift away without conflict. None of that is your failure. Growth rearranges relationships. Alignment reshapes connections. And when you stop shrinking, anything built on your shrinking must either adjust or dissolve. That is not cruelty, that is consequence. You have also become more patient with process. You no longer rush healing. You no longer demand instant clarity. You trust timing more than impulse. And trust in timing is evidence of inner security. Insecurity demands immediate answers. Security allows unfolding. And unfolding is where real transformation lives. Even when uncertainty appears now, it does not paralyze you the way it once did. You have learned that uncertainty does not mean danger, it means possibility. It means you are standing at the edge of something new rather than trapped in something old. And rather than panic, you breathe. Rather than flee, you listen. Rather than assume the worst, you wait for wisdom to surface. Waiting used to feel like punishment. Now it feels like preparation. You are also no longer surprised by resistance when you choose what is right. You understand now that resistance is not a sign you are wrong, often, it is confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. Ease is not always alignment. Difficulty is not always opposition. You measure progress differently now. Not by applause, but by peace. Not by speed, but by sustainability. Not by intensity, but by integrity. And through all of this, one truth stands firm beneath everything else: you are no longer accessible to what thrives on your confusion. You are no longer controllable through fear. You are no longer manipulable through guilt. You are no longer reachable through shame. Those channels are closed. Not because you hardened your heart, but because you healed it. So when old thoughts try to resurface, they find no agreement. When old habits try to return, they find no home. When old fears try to speak, they find no audience. And silence, in this case, is not absence, it is victory. If you ever question whether this change is real, look at how you recover now. Look at how quickly you return to center. Look at how you no longer spiral the way you once did. Look at how you forgive yourself faster. Look at how you choose rest without guilt. These are not small shifts. These are signs of deep rewiring. And deep rewiring does not reverse easily. You are becoming someone who cannot be easily shaken because you are no longer built on unstable foundations. You are built on truth, awareness, humility, and resilience. And that combination does not make you loud, it makes you grounded. Carry this knowing with you. Not as pride, but as remembrance. Remember who you were. Remember what changed. Remember what no longer has power. And keep walking forward, not anxiously, not aggressively, but intentionally. Because the devil can't touch you anymore, not because the world got quieter, but because your inner world did. And from that stillness, you are unstoppable. And as this quiet strength settles deeper, you begin to notice something almost paradoxical: life still brings challenges, but they no longer define your identity. Problems arrive as events, not verdicts. Struggles appear as moments, not destinies. You face them without dramatizing them, without turning them into stories about your worth or your future. This alone dismantles one of the oldest tricks darkness ever used against you, convincing you that a temporary circumstance was a permanent truth. You no longer collapse inward when things go wrong. You adjust. You recalibrate. You move forward with wisdom instead of panic. Panic once drained your energy before the real work even began. Now your energy is preserved for what actually matters. And this preservation is not accidental, it is learned. Learned through disappointment. Learned through silence. Learned through watching what happens when you give too much of yourself to what cannot sustain you. There was a season when you thought healing meant never feeling pain again. But you have discovered something far more powerful. Healing means pain no longer controls your direction. You still feel. You still care. You still love deeply. But you are no longer ruled by emotional storms. You stand within them, aware, anchored, present. And storms lose their power when you stop running from them. This anchoring has changed the way you relate to time. You are no longer haunted by the past or anxious about the future. You learn from what was, prepare for what's ahead, but live in what is. Presence has become your refuge. And presence is inaccessible to fear, because fear feeds on imagined futures and remembered wounds. When you are present, fear starves. You also no longer feel the need to prove how much you've grown. Growth that needs validation is still fragile. Your growth speaks through consistency, not over chaos, truth over comfort, growth over familiarity. Because what you have become cannot be undone by what once held you. The devil can't touch you anymore, not because the world stopped testing you, but because you stopped agreeing with what tried to destroy you. And as this understanding settles even deeper, you begin to recognize a new kind of freedom, the freedom of not needing to be rescued anymore. Not because you don't believe in help, but because you trust your ability to stand. You have learned how to sit with discomfort without collapsing, how to face uncertainty without losing direction, how to move forward without guarantees. This self-trust is not arrogance, it is maturity. It is the quiet confidence of someone who has already walked through fire and realized they survived not by luck, but by inner strength they didn't know they had. You also begin to see how much of your past struggle was fueled by resistance to reality. Fighting what was. Denying what hurt. Chasing what wasn't ready. Now, acceptance has replaced resistance. And acceptance is not surrender, it is alignment with truth. When you stop fighting reality, your energy returns to you. When your energy returns, your clarity sharpens. And when clarity sharpens, fear loses its fog. This is why you feel more present now, even on ordinary days. Even routine moments carry a sense of groundedness. You are no longer constantly waiting for life to start or for pain to end. You live in the now, and the now feels enough. This alone disrupts countless internal battles. The enemy thrives on keeping people mentally elsewhere, stuck in regret or anxiety. Presence breaks that cycle instantly. There is also a deepening compassion forming within you, not just for others, but for yourself. You no longer punish yourself for learning slowly or stumbling along the way. You understand now that growth is nonlinear. Some lessons repeat not because you failed, but because you needed deeper integration. And integration takes time. This patience with yourself is another door that has closed to darkness. Self-cruelty was never holiness, it was bondage. You may notice that your standards have risen quietly. Not from ego, but from self-respect. You no longer tolerate environments that drain your spirit. You no longer excuse behavior that dishonors your values. You no longer settle for connections that require you to shrink. This is not judgment, it is discernment. And discernment is a form of love, love for your future, love for your peace, love for your purpose. Your sense of purpose itself has matured. It is no longer tied to proving anything. You don't need to impress, outperform, or outshine. You simply need to be faithful to what you've been entrusted with. Purpose now feels like responsibility, not pressure. And responsibility grounded in peace is sustainable. You are also learning that silence does not mean stagnation. Some of the most important inner work happens when nothing seems to be happening externally. Roots grow in darkness. Foundations form underground. What looks like delay is often depth being built. And depth is what keeps you steady when visibility increases. This is why you are less reactive to opinions now. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't crush you. You listen, you learn, you filter. You know who you are becoming, even if others don't yet see it. And you are okay with that. You are no longer driven by urgency to be understood. Being aligned matters more than being applauded. There is a gentleness entering your strength now. You don't need hardness to feel protected. You don't need walls to feel safe. Your safety comes from awareness, from boundaries, from wisdom. You can be open without being exposed. You can be kind without being naive. This balance is rare, and it is powerful. And when moments of doubt do appear, as they sometimes will, you no longer spiral into self-questioning. You observe them. You ask where they came from. You listen for what they are trying to teach you. Then you let them pass. Doubt no longer defines you, it informs you and moves on. You are living proof that transformation does not always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with quieter mornings, calmer reactions, deeper breaths, and steadier decisions. Sometimes the biggest miracle is stability. And stability is something darkness cannot imitate. So continue forward with this awareness. Protect it, not through fear, but through consistency. Return to what centers you. Honor what grounds you. Remember what you've learned. You are not starting over, you are continuing from wisdom. And if there are days when you forget how far you've come, remember this: you no longer break the way you used to. You no longer lose yourself the way you once did. You no longer believe the lies that once felt so convincing. That alone is evidence enough. You have changed. Deeply. Permanently. And because of that, what once had access to you no longer does, and as this evolution continues, you start to sense a deeper rhythm guiding your life. A rhythm that doesn't rush and doesn't panic, a rhythm that moves with quiet certainty. You are no longer chasing signs everywhere because you recognize alignment when you feel it. It feels like steadiness in your chest, like calm confidence in your decisions, like peace that doesn't need explanation. You are no longer desperate for reassurance because your inner compass has strengthened. You trust yourself now, and that trust is a fortress. You begin to realize that many of the battles you thought were spiritual attacks were actually invitations to maturity. Not everything that challenged you was meant to destroy you. Some things were meant to teach you discernment, restraint, patience, and wisdom. And now that those lessons have taken root, those battles no longer need to repeat. Life does not test what has already been mastered. You are also no longer impressed by appearances. You see beyond charisma, beyond words, beyond promises. You pay attention to patterns, consistency, and fruit. This shift alone protects you from countless traps. Deception thrives on surfaces. Depth exposes truth. And you have learned to live from depth. There is a new kind of humility in you now, not the kind that shrinks, but the kind that is honest. You know your strengths without boasting. You acknowledge your weaknesses without shame. You ask for help without feeling inferior. This balance keeps you grounded. And grounded people are difficult to destabilize. You may notice that your emotional world feels more spacious. Feelings come and go without overwhelming you. You allow yourself to experience sadness without drowning in it, joy without clinging to it, anger without letting it control you. Emotional literacy has replaced emotional chaos. And literacy creates freedom. You have also learned that not every door needs to be opened, and not every opportunity needs to be taken. Discernment has taught you that some good things are still distractions. You choose what aligns, not just what is available. This selective focus conserves your energy and sharpens your purpose. There is a growing reverence within you for quiet moments. You no longer fear stillness because stillness no longer confronts you with unresolved pain. It comforts you. It restores you. Silence has become a sanctuary rather than a threat. And when silence becomes safe, inner peace becomes sustainable. You are also learning to bless what leaves without chasing it. You understand now that some things exit your life not as losses, but as releases. Letting go no longer feels like abandonment, it feels like alignment. And alignment brings relief. There is an inner authority forming that does not need to dominate or control. You influence simply by being steady. Your presence carries weight because it is anchored in truth. People may not always understand you, but they feel the difference. And that difference speaks louder than words. When fear tries to revisit you now, it feels outdated, like a language you no longer speak fluently. You recognize it, but it doesn't persuade you. You have outgrown the version of yourself that needed fear as a motivator. Purpose guides you now, not panic. You are also becoming more honest about your limits, and this honesty protects you. You rest when needed. You step back when necessary. You no longer glorify exhaustion. You understand that sustainable growth requires care, not constant pressure. And care is not weakness, it is wisdom. There is a quiet gratitude emerging in you for what once hurt. Not gratitude for pain itself, but for the clarity it brought. You can see now how every difficult season carved space within you for strength, compassion, and depth. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was meaningless. You are no longer defined by what you escaped, but by what you are building. Your focus has shifted from survival to stewardship, how you steward your time, your energy, your relationships, your gifts. And stewardship creates legacy. So keep honoring this growth, even on days when it feels ordinary. Ordinary days are where real transformation lives. Consistency is where strength is forged. Quiet faithfulness is where power settles. You are walking forward with eyes open, heart steady, and spirit anchored. And because of that, what once sought to consume you can no longer reach you. Not because you are perfect, but because you are awake. And once you are awake, you are free. And as this freedom settles into something lived rather than merely understood, you begin to notice how deeply your perception has changed. You no longer see life as something happening to you, but something unfolding through you. This shift is subtle, yet it alters everything. When challenges arise, you don't immediately ask how to escape them, you ask how to move through them with integrity. That single question changes fear into focus. It transforms anxiety into intention. You are no longer startled by complexity. Where confusion once overwhelmed you, curiosity now steps in. You lean into learning instead of retreating into doubt. You are patient with what you don't yet understand, trusting that clarity will come in its own time. This patience is not passive, it is anchored. It is the patience of someone who knows that rushing insight only creates noise, while waiting allows wisdom to surface. There is also a growing alignment between what you believe and how you live. Before, there may have been gaps, places where your values spoke louder than your actions, or your actions moved faster than your convictions. Now, those gaps are closing. Integrity is no longer an ideal you admire, it is a standard you inhabit. And when integrity becomes embodied, self-respect follows naturally. You no longer need external validation to confirm what you already know internally. You may notice that your relationship with uncertainty has softened. You don't need every outcome mapped in advance to feel safe. You have learned that safety is not the absence of risk, but the presence of trust, trust in your discernment, your resilience, your capacity to adapt. This trust makes you flexible rather than fragile. And flexibility is strength that does not crack under pressure. You are also beginning to understand that true peace does not mean life without conflict, it means inner steadiness despite it. You can sit in tension without being consumed by it. You can hear opposing perspectives without losing your center. You can engage without entanglement. This emotional independence does not isolate you, it frees you to connect without fear of losing yourself. There is a noticeable shift in how you give now. You give from fullness, not from depletion. You help without overextending. You support without rescuing. You love without losing boundaries. This is not a hardening of the heart, it is a strengthening of it. Love guided by wisdom lasts longer than love driven by urgency. You are also more comfortable with incompleteness. You no longer demand that everything makes sense immediately. You allow questions to remain open. You trust that answers unfold when you are ready to carry them. This openness keeps you humble and grounded, curious rather than rigid. And rigidity was never protection, it was fear pretending to be certainty. Your inner narrative has changed too. The story you tell yourself about who you are and where you are going is no longer harsh or fatalistic. It is realistic, compassionate, and forward-looking. You acknowledge obstacles without magnifying them. You recognize progress without exaggerating it. This balanced self-story keeps you moving steadily rather than swinging between extremes. You may also feel a growing sense of responsibility for the energy you bring into spaces. You are more intentional with your words, more mindful of your tone, more aware of your influence. Not because you feel pressure to be perfect, but because you understand the weight of presence. Presence shapes environments. And you are learning to be someone whose presence stabilizes rather than agitates. There is an increasing clarity about what truly matters to you. Many things that once felt urgent now feel optional. Many things that once felt essential now feel distracting. You are simplifying, not because you have less capacity, but because you value depth over excess. This simplification creates room for what is meaningful to grow. You are also less afraid of endings. You understand now that endings are not failures, they are transitions. You allow chapters to close without clinging. You trust that what is meant to continue will do so naturally, and what is meant to end will make space for something more aligned. This trust makes letting go gentler and beginnings less frantic. And through all of this, there is a quiet gratitude woven into your days. Not loud gratitude that demands constant positivity, but steady gratitude that acknowledges progress, lessons, and resilience. Gratitude that coexists with realism. Gratitude that does not deny difficulty, but recognizes growth within it. You are becoming someone who moves through life with intention rather than reaction, with awareness rather than assumption, with courage rather than compulsion. This way of living does not draw attention to itself, but it changes everything it touches. So continue forward without needing to prove how far you've come. Let your steadiness speak. Let your consistency testify. Let your peace be evidence. You are no longer defined by what once tried to break you. You are defined by how fully you have learned to live beyond it. And as you keep moving in this direction, something else unfolds that is almost imperceptible at first. You stop negotiating with yourself. The inner debates that once drained your energy grow quieter. You no longer argue endlessly about what you already know is right. You listen, you decide, you act. This decisiveness is not impulsive, it is rooted. It comes from alignment between thought, value, and action. And alignment dissolves inner conflict, which is where so much of your exhaustion once lived. You begin to notice how much lighter life feels when you are not constantly second-guessing your own instincts. Doubt used to disguise itself as humility, but now you can tell the difference. True humility listens. False humility hesitates endlessly. You have learned to listen deeply. Then move forward with trust. That trust does not make you reckless, it makes you responsive. And responsiveness is far more powerful than control. Your emotional landscape continues to mature. You don't rush to label feelings as good or bad. You allow them to exist without letting them dictate your identity. You understand now that emotions are information, not commands. They signal, they inform, they pass. This understanding keeps you grounded even when feelings run strong. You experience fully without being consumed. You are also becoming more honest about what drains you and what restores you. You no longer force yourself into rhythms that leave you depleted. You pay attention to your body, your mind, your spirit. You rest without guilt. You engage without overextending. This self-attunement is not selfish, it is sustainable. And sustainability is wisdom in action. There is a growing clarity about your role in the world, not in grandiose terms, but in meaningful ones. You don't need to change everything. You don't need to save everyone. You simply need to be faithful to what is placed before you. This clarity releases you from pressure and anchors you in purpose. Purpose no longer feels heavy, it feels focused. You are also learning to release control over outcomes. You do your part with integrity, then you let go. This release is not indifference, it is trust. Trust that you have shown up fully. Trust that what is beyond you does not require your anxiety to function. And when you let go of outcomes, peace settles naturally. You notice that your inner world has become a place you can return to, rather than escape from. Silence no longer frightens you. Solitude no longer feels like punishment. These spaces have become restorative. They remind you who you are when nothing is demanded of you. And knowing who you are in stillness strengthens who you are in movement. You also carry less resentment now. Not because everything was fair, but because holding resentment. Now. Not because everything was fair, but because holding resentment no longer serves you. You have learned that forgiveness is not about excusing harm, it is about releasing yourself from its grip. And release is freedom. It clears space for growth that bitterness would have occupied. Your conversations have changed too. You speak with more intention. You listen more than you interrupt. You choose words that build rather than wound. Not because you are afraid to be honest, but because honesty no longer needs to be harsh to be true. Truth delivered with clarity and compassion carries far more power than truth delivered with force. You are becoming someone who is comfortable with being in process. You don't rush to label yourself finished or fixed. You allow yourself to evolve. This openness keeps you teachable without making you unstable. You grow without losing your center. And in moments when you look back, you don't feel the same weight of regret you once did. You see your past with perspective rather than judgment. You recognize the courage it took to survive what you didn't understand then. You honor the version of yourself that did the best they could with what they knew. That honoring integrates your story instead of fracturing it. You move forward now with a steadiness that does not need constant reassurance. You know storms may come, but you also know how to anchor. You know uncertainty may appear, but you also know how to navigate. You know fear may whisper, but you also know it does not speak truth. This is the quiet victory of growth. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of resilience, not the removal of pressure, but the strengthening of foundation, not the silencing of all doubt, but the ability to move forward despite it. So you continue. Not loudly. Not urgently. But faithfully. With awareness. With intention. With peace that does not depend on circumstances. And in doing so, you embody a truth that can no longer be taken from you. You are not who you were, and you will not return to what once held you. The door is closed, not by force, but by growth. And as you keep walking in this awareness, another layer reveals itself, one that many never reach because it requires patience rather than intensity. You begin to understand that your growth is no longer fragile. It doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It doesn't collapse when routine replaces excitement. It holds steady even when nothing dramatic is happening. This is how you know it is real. Anything that only survives in emotional highs was never rooted deeply. What you are building now survives ordinary days, quiet weeks, even seasons that feel uneventful. And that endurance is power. You start noticing how your reactions have slowed, not because you care less, but because you understand more. You don't rush to conclusions. You don't rush to defend yourself. You don't rush to assume intentions. This pause between stimulus and response is one of the greatest freedoms you have gained. In that pause lies choice. And choice dismantles control. You are also becoming more selective with your attention. You no longer feed everything with your focus. You have realized that attention is currency, and where you spend it shapes your reality. Drama starves when ignored. Fear weakens when not entertained. Meaning grows when nurtured consistently. This discipline of attention protects your inner world more effectively than constant vigilance ever could. There is a new respect within you for timing. You trust that what is meant to unfold will do so without your force. You still act, still plan, still move forward, but without desperation. Desperation once pushed you into places you weren't ready for. Now patience keeps you aligned with what can actually sustain you. You are no longer impressed by speed. You value direction. You may notice that you no longer romanticize the idea of being misunderstood. You don't seek isolation to feel special, nor do you chase belonging at the cost of authenticity. You accept that not everyone will see you clearly, and you make peace with that. Peace with being unseen in certain spaces is a sign of inner security. You don't need universal recognition to feel grounded. Your inner dialogue continues to soften. The voice that once demanded perfection now encourages progress. The voice that once condemned now corrects gently. This shift changes everything. You grow faster when shame is no longer driving the process. Growth fueled by compassion lasts longer than growth fueled by fear. You are also becoming more grounded in reality, not cynical, but realistic. You don't expect perfection from yourself or others. You allow people to be human without turning their flaws into personal wounds. This groundedness frees you from constant disappointment. You understand that expectations need alignment, not inflation. There is an increasing sense of responsibility for how you move through the world. Not responsibility born of pressure, but of awareness. You know your words matter. Your presence matters. Your energy affects spaces. And rather than feeling burdened by this, you feel honored by it. You move with care because you value what you carry. You also recognize now that some lessons never announce their arrival. They show up disguised as inconvenience, delay, repetition, or discomfort. But instead of resisting them, you observe. You ask what is being shaped in you. This posture transforms frustration into formation. And formation is far more valuable than momentary relief. You have learned to differentiate between solitude and isolation. Solitude restores you. Isolation drains you. You choose your moments alone intentionally now, not as escape, but as alignment. And when you return to others, you do so more whole, more present, more genuine. There is a quiet courage growing in you, the courage to stay consistent when no one is watching, to choose integrity when shortcuts are available, to keep building even when progress feels invisible. This courage doesn't shout. It shows up. And showing up consistently is what changes lives, starting with your own. You are no longer waiting to become someone else to feel at peace. You allow peace to meet you where you are, even as you grow. This permission changes the entire journey. Growth no longer feels like chasing a distant version of yourself. It feels like unfolding into who you already are. And if you ever wonder whether this transformation will last, remember this: you no longer desire the things that once destroyed you. You no longer envy the chaos you escaped. You no longer mistake intensity for truth. These changes do not reverse easily. They are signs of a mind renewed, a heart stabilized, a spirit anchored. So you continue, not with urgency, not with fear, but with quiet resolve. You keep choosing awareness over autopilot, depth over distraction, truth over comfort. And each choice strengthens the foundation beneath you. You have crossed a point of no return, not because the world changed, but because you did. And what has changed within you has closed doors that will not reopen, not by force, but by wisdom, not by resistance, but by growth. And now, before this journey closes, take a slow breath and feel what has settled inside you while listening to these words. This was never just a message about struggle, darkness, or victory. This was about you. About how far you've come without applause. About how much you've healed without announcing it. About how quietly, steadily, courage replaced fear and wisdom replaced chaos inside your life. If this message reached you, it's because somewhere in your heart you already knew the truth: you are not the same person you used to be. You don't break the same way anymore. You don't fall into the same traps. You don't believe the same lies. And that is not an accident. That is growth. That is grace. That is proof that even the hardest seasons did not defeat you, they shaped you. Let this be your reminder: you don't need to go back to who you were to prove how strong you've become. You don't need to fight battles that no longer belong to you. You don't need to explain your peace to those who only understood your pain. Keep walking forward gently, faithfully, and intentionally. The life you are building now is quieter, but it is deeper. Slower, but more real. And it will last. If this message brought clarity to your mind, calm to your heart, or strength to your spirit, don't let it end with you. There is someone out there right now who is still standing where you once stood, confused, tired, searching for hope in silence. Share this message with them. Let it reach them at the right moment, just as it reached you. If this spoke to you, like this video so it can travel farther than we ever could. Subscribe so you stay connected to messages that don't just inspire for a moment, and share with others and spread this knowledge, which will help you grow for a lifetime. And what lies ahead for you is not a return to old battles, but a deeper walk into peace, purpose, and truth. You have changed. You are growing. And the best part of your journey is not behind you, it is unfolding now.